Thank you very much, and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you today in Tallinn in this wonderful venue. I just learned during lunch break that it was built on purpose 600 years ago for this event, so excellent Estonian foresight preparing for today and for this event. Really, it's really great to be here with you. I will spend the next 25-30 minutes to tell you something about what the European Union is doing in space, and certainly what are some of the key challenges and key elements ahead. And of course, I will be very happy to take any questions you may have to enter into some discussion a little bit later. I will also, of course, talk as well about the EU Agency for the Space Program, our agency. What are we doing? What are our key tasks? But before starting, let me go briefly to the EU Space Program. So what is the European Union doing in space? So the European Union is doing a number of things, a number of very important things. Certainly, as you know, in Europe, there are different actors working in space matters. For us, we are working basically along three key pillars of work. Navigation, satellite navigation. I'm sure you've heard about Europeans' global navigation satellite system, Galileo. Worldwide coverage, typical precision of about 1 to 2 meters, and more than 4 billion receivers worldwide. We have also the regional coverage system, regional because it covers the European continent, EGNOS. We are working on Earth observation. I had the opportunity already to talk to some of you that are working on Copernicus and different areas, aspects of Copernicus. Copernicus is our eyes on the Earth. And we have a new pillar, a pillar that is growing, that is consolidating right now, related to satellite communication, and in particular, secure satellite communication. On the one hand, with GovSatcom. I will tell you a bit later what that is, but also with the upcoming new Union Secure Connectivity constellation, IRIS². There are other activities of the Union in space. I have here, for example, space situational awareness. Also a lot of work being done on research, being done on innovation, support to entrepreneurship, etc., etc. The first question is, why do we do that? Why is the European Union involved in space? Well, by many reasons, but first and foremost, because there is a clear understanding that space is key for the EU agenda. There are the EU priorities. These are the priorities of the European Union, but certainly also the priorities of each of the member states, and certainly as well the Estonian priorities. And space addresses them. Space is important for the implementation of these priorities. First, of course, for a strong and secure Europe, because space contributes to our strategic autonomy as a union. Space plays a fundamental role when it comes to the green transition, so-called implementation of the Green Deal. Space is important in very different sectors to make them more efficient, to reduce our environmental footprint, be it in the area of transport, agriculture, smart cities, etc., etc. Space plays an important role in the digital transition. And of course, here the element of the uninterrupted high-capacity connectivity everywhere is a key element. Last but not least, and I think it is very much what we see in this conference and what I've heard also for some of you in the breaks and in the previous presentations, space is fundamental for creating an environment that is innovation-friendly. A lot of the new innovations, a lot of the new ideas, they have a link with space. They have a link with space data. They have a link with space services. And if we want to have an innovative union, if we want to have a powerful, resilient economy, we need to re-up that innovation that comes from space. So this is the reasons, these are, if you want, the key reasons why the union is involved in space, is to respond to these priorities. Now, as an agency, of course, I've showed you the programs. We don't do everything in the programs. I mean, we work in very close collaboration with the European Commission, European Space Agency. We work with industry all across the Union. And our mission is on three main pillars. The pillar of exploitation. So that basically means that we operate, we provide services, so with a user-oriented agency. We are developing the GovSatcom capability. We are operating the front desk of the youth space surveillance and tracking. We are working deeply in security, and I'll tell you a bit more on what we do in security in a moment. And last but not least, we work in fostering the utilization. And this is really important because in the end, the measure of the things we do in space is how far are they used? What are the benefits that they bring? They bring to our citizens, they bring to our economy, they bring also to our security, if you want, that they bring to our society at large. A few numbers. I know it's after lunch, but anyway, I had to leave you with a few numbers. As an agency, we have been renamed, if you want, EUSPA in 2021. We have about 20 years history, first very much dedicated to satellite navigation. Then, of course, the agency evolved. Our headquarters is in Prague, in the Czech Republic. We have other operational sites from where we deliver our tasks, our activities. Now let's go a little bit step by step on the things where we do, and also there I will tell you where I see some of the challenges and the key elements ahead. And we start with Galileo. So Galileo today is a very successful system. We have global coverage, so Galileo is providing services all around the world. You may know or not, I'm sure you do, you are Galileo users. If you have a modern cell phone, if you have a more recent car, you have Galileo and you are using Galileo every day. Now, we are also particularly proud of Galileo. As Europeans, I think we should, because Galileo demonstrates every day its performance. Galileo is today 2 to 3 times better than GPS in terms of accuracy, 5 to 10 times better than Beidou and GLONASS. So it is really European excellence every day being delivered to our smartphones, to our navigation devices. Now, Galileo has different signals. So there are the signals we all receive. It's what we call the open service, it's open to everyone. But we also have services for governments. I had the opportunity early this morning to exchange with the representatives of the Estonian government about the use of these special signals, the so-called public regulated service. We have a search and rescue signal. This is important in particular for search and rescue at sea. It's a narrow market, of course, but it's very important. We are talking about safety of life. And we have, since a bit more than a year and a half, something that we call the high accuracy service that allows us to increase the performance, so the accuracy of the signal, by a factor of around 10. So from the 1 to 2 meters, we can go down to close to 20 centimeters. And this is showing to be a game changer, and a game changer for many applications. For example, if you look at autonomous driving, in autonomous driving, changing from a 1 to 2 meter accuracy to a 20 centimeter accuracy really matters, because it's the difference between being on this side of the road or on the other side of the road. So it can really make the difference, and we are starting, by the way, to see the first receivers being equipped with this, with the ability to get this signal. Then we have EGNOS. EGNOS is a very interesting case, I have to say. I mean, EGNOS was the first European navigation system. It is a satellite-based augmentation system, so it actually picks up existing signals and confirms their reliability. It was developed for aviation, so it is still very much used in aviation. We will very soon reach 1,000 airports across the Union that are equipped with EGNOS landing procedures. But it's also very used in other domains. And for example, a very interesting one is agriculture. Today, about 97% of all the tractors medium and large-sized tractors that are sold in the European Union, they are equipped with EGNOS. And you may ask, but why? Well, very simple, because it brings a benefit, it brings an advantage. By equipping the tractors with EGNOS, you can do precision agriculture. Precision agriculture is not only better to our environment, is not only more efficient from an environment point of view, but also from an economic and financial point of view. Because if you guide the tractor precisely through the field, you avoid double passes, you reduce the work done. So there is also economic advantage. And these programs are developing. I will not go through the whole slide in detail, but these programs are developing and continue to develop. More than 4 billion users in Galileo, today, 4 billion receivers, every modern smartphone, modern cars, but then also in many other sectorial applications. The number of satellites continue to grow. Only this year we launched four new satellites. We are also working on improvements of Galileo. There is a very important one that we are testing right now, which is an authentication signal. The authentication signal works a little bit like the watermark in a euro bill. If you look at the euro bill, you will see the watermark. It's the mark that tells you that actually that bill is a real bill and it's not a fake. This will work a similar way. It will put a kind of a watermark in the signal to tell the user that that signal really came from a Galileo satellite and it was not faked by someone with a bad intention. So I think it is also a very, very important feature. Copernicus, I've talked. I will not elongate myself a lot in Copernicus. Also, I want to leave time, of course, for questions and for the dialogue. A lot of data being generated with Copernicus, but not only the data of Copernicus is very important, also the services that are produced with that data. You have them here. Certainly a lot on climate and weather, so the atmosphere service, the climate change service, but also other things. The land service, playing a very, very important role in agriculture, monitoring of biophysical parameters. The marine service. The marine service is, for example, fundamental for fisheries. Fishery organizations and institutions are using this service. The emergency service of Copernicus. And here, by the way, between Copernicus and Galileo, there are great synergies. Mapping in case of disasters. There was a particular bad week, I have to say, a particular negative week in September. You may remember it was the 2nd or 3rd week of September, and in that week we had 8 activations of the emergency service of Copernicus. We had wildfires in the south. Particular Portugal was quite targeted with wildfires, and at the same time we had in Central Europe big floods. The Czech Republic, Slovakia, Germany, Austria, Poland, etc. They all activated this service to get up-to-date images of flooding areas or, as I mentioned, also wildfire. And this is important information. This is information that makes the difference to those on the field that are planning a rescue operation, that are planning any kind of civil protection operation. And of course, related to emergency, also the security services of Copernicus. Moving on to the secured communications. Secure telecom is very important, and is very important in particular for our governments. We are working on this on GovSatcom. GovSatcom is a pooling and sharing program, so based on existing capabilities to use the principles of bringing together capabilities for the service of all the EU member states. And here we are looking to very interesting applications in the domain of surveillance, of course, the management of critical infrastructure, management of crisis, and then some specific cases. Here you have an image of the Arctic, but there are particular cases where secure communications are of value. We are advancing very fast on this. We started the industrial activities end of last year. Last week we had the first demonstration. By the way, I know that also your national authorities here in the Estonian national authorities participated in this first demonstration. And by end of this year, beginning of next, we want to start providing the first services. So the first opportunities for governmental customers to communicate securely using the EU GovSatcom capability. But there is more. We are working on IRIS². You may have heard already today about IRIS². I will not elongate a lot. IRIS², the EU secure connectivity infrastructure, which, of course, from a union point of view, will enhance further the secured communication capabilities. And last but not least, and this is actually quite interesting, and it's also a good bridge for the next topic, is space surveillance and tracking. Space surveillance and tracking, today we are providing different services. Let me focus on, so that we, of course, fragmentation analysis is relevant, but let me focus on the other two. First, the service on the re-entry analysis. What does this mean? Well, we all know that there is plenty of junk in space, old satellites, old upper stages of rockets. What happens when they re-enter? Can they make damage on the ground? Well, yes, they can. And this is why it is important to have a warning system. Warning system, for example, that we use to communicate with air navigation service providers. There were several episodes. We have one I remember well, where on a Monday morning we asked air navigation service providers to close the airspace over the Iberian Peninsula because there was an old piece of a Chinese upper stage that was re-entering. There was a risk of a re-enter and therefore a risk of hitting an airplane or even hitting, and then of course hitting as well ground. Well, it re-entered somewhere else. It's always a risk-based analysis, but for us the risk was sufficiently high to issue their request. And these are things that happen with a certain regularity. I mean, this is not far away future science fiction. This is already reality today. But there is also the collision element, because there is risks of collisions in space. By the way, that risk is increasing exponentially, especially with the small satellite constellations. It is a risk for our own satellites, so our Copernicus satellites, our Galileo satellites, but for the satellites of all operators. And therefore, space surveillance and tracking is a very, very important domain, and certainly a domain that will grow, and that will grow quite significantly in the future. And I mean, all this is moving, these two areas are moving quite dynamically. These are, if you want, whereas Galileo, Copernicus, they are well established. These are programs that in the meantime, they are more than 20 years old. So they are well established. These areas, secure communication, space situational awareness, or space surveillance and tracking, are areas that are moving very fast because there is a real need for them. Then let me leave you with some food for thought, because I said that security is important for us. And we work very, very much in the security domain. And let me tell you a little bit what we do in security. And here, this graphic and this chart shows me what you do. But also, in order to catch your attention, I will explain it in a different manner. We care of security from two angles. So we look at the security from two different angles. First, we look at the security of the systems. Basically, we try to answer the question, are our assets secure? Are our satellites secure? But in particular, are our ground infrastructure, our ground systems, are they secure? Also because you certainly know, but when you look to a space system, actually most of the size and the value of the space system never flies in space, is on the ground. Are all the controls, the control machines, the mission machines that make that space system work. So are they secure? Are they secure? Are they physically secure? In our ground systems, do we have locks and fences and doors and alarms? Of course, physical security is important. But maybe more important than that, are they cyber secured? Do we have enough protection in order to prevent a malicious attack, a cyber attack? And of course, we know that the threats in this domain are growing. And whereas 5 years ago, physical security, cyber security, they were balanced, today the cyber security element is very, very important. And the radio frequency security as well. and this is as well an important element, is our radio frequency spectrum protected enough for us to be able of receiving the signals? It's a bit more complex, but is as well a very, very important domain. So this is one way to look at security. The other way is, now, okay, we have all these signals and data and pictures and precise things. Can they be used for security missions? Can the security actors in the member states, here in Estonia, everywhere in Europe, use these for their security missions? This can be police officer missions, this can be civil protection mission, fire brigades. I had the example already on the emergency service, but this can also be for military users, for defense purposes. Can they be used and how can they be used? And certainly the second aspect, so this not only security of space, but space for security, is also a very, very important element. We do both. Here you have our security center. It's a duplicated center, so you see two pictures there because we have systems in redundant mode. In these centers, we do not only the security monitoring, so the physical and cyber security protection, in this case of Galileo, but we also do the interface with the governmental user, so the user of space for the security need, where they can obtain access to the signals. These signals are specially protected, so you need to have a particular password or a particular way in order to access this type of systems. But there is more than that, and I know there is industry in the room, so I could not avoid to bring as well our ISAC, because security, yes, I mean, there is the work on security of the systems, there is the work on space for security applications, but there is also work in order to raise awareness on the importance of security. And there we see different sensitivities to the matter. Together with the Commission, we are working on this Information Sharing and Analysis Center. If you want, it's one of the tools that we have in order to help industry, and in particular those dealing with space, to build, of course, awareness, but to build as well capacities and competencies in the security domain, in the sense of understanding that security is important for space. And doesn't really matter what you do in space, you have to have the security angle. You need to see as well the security angle. Now, this network is created, the ISAC exists, still is open for application. So if you are interested to join the ISAC through our website, you will find it. It is actually a network of exchange across industry to share best practices, to share threats, to share risks, etc., etc. So it is, if you want, it's a capacity building type of network. We animate it with the Commission, but certainly we want a broad industrial participation. The second element that we are doing in terms of capacity building is our Space Academy, EUSPA Academy, where we have put together a number of opportunities, primarily dedicated to innovators and entrepreneurs, but not only, to learn, because learning is important. I mean, if we want to have a strong EU industry, the industry needs to grow, the competencies need to grow. So there are many modules, and by the way, these resources are free, so you can go there, you can be part of it. We are, of course, explaining a number of things that are relevant for innovators and entrepreneurs on a number of different disciplines, if you want. And we have, or we are right now, in the process of enlarging this also on cyber-related matters, so cybersecurity-related matters. So in order to have, if you want, it's part of the, if you want, public service that we do to build the capacity all across the Union. So these are the things I wanted to tell you when it comes to security. Then the last thing I've mentioned in the beginning is that for us, the use of data, the use of signals, the use is very, very important. And it is, and I mean, we look at where can space be used. Space can be used in many different areas, many different sectors of our economy. If you are curious, you will find these two reports that you have there. They are, by the way, they are free. You can download them from our server, from our webpage, where you see the market reports, Earth observation, GNSS, and secure SATCOM. And you see already what is the value that space has today in the market. I mean, the value of space, upstream, midstream, downstream, so the full value chain is about 260 billion euro. It's big. And this is already quite significant. Now, the interesting thing is that on top of this, this is a growing sector. So the potential is that in the next 10 years, this will double, or a little bit more than double. So there is a lot of potential and opportunities for companies that want to work with space to deliver value. And where do they deliver value? Well, in many sectors. Transport. Transport is a typical user of space. Road transport, rail, aviation, maritime, drones, of course. A lot of drones, drone manufacturers using space data. But also others. I mentioned agriculture, forestry, fisheries, also big users of space. Others that are maybe a little bit less conventional. Things like insurance and finance. The insurance sector, by the way, has a big potential for growth in terms of use of space. The pharmaceutical industry, the medical pharmaceutical sector, is becoming, in particular because of climate change and climate adaptation, is becoming also a user of space data with potential for growth. By the way, I will not tell you all the story because then you can read the reports. These reports will tell you a little bit what these areas are, those consolidated and those with potential for deployment. And here, of course, everything we do in terms of market intelligence is very important, very relevant. Then, how can you take benefit of that? If you are a developer of downstream applications, how can you take advantage of that? Well, we have a number of opportunities. We support industry. Certainly a number of Horizon Europe projects for the development of applications. Quite relevant. There are regular calls on these. We have as well fundamental elements. This is for more development of receivers. If you are a receiver developer for a particular signal. The aviation grant is, of course, more for aviation, and very important, in particular for startup innovators, so those that are in the early phases from ideation up to starting in the market. There is Cassini. And Cassini is a very relevant, very important tool to support startups and innovators. In Cassini, there are prizes, for example. If you have an idea, or if you have a prototype, or if you have a market-ready product, there are prizes in Cassini. But there is more, of course. I talked about the EUSPA Academy, but there are things like networking, contact with investors, the work that we do as well with the European Investment Bank for financing. So if you are looking for investors, Cassini can help as well on that. Then, as I'm coming to a close, maybe one example. One of the things that we are doing right now, which is what we call the Copernicus demonstrator. So there are projects in a number of different areas. I took one which I find quite interesting, where we have a drone company working with us about the certification of drones for flight over populated areas. As you can imagine, it's not an easy thing to be done. And there, by the way, we are working with our sister or partner agency, EASA, the European Union Air Safety Agency. So these are the airplane certifiers. They are a European Union like we are. We are dealing with space, they are dealing with airplanes. And basically, we are working together on what are the rules and the principles to certify a drone if it will fly over populated areas. And of course, EASA is starting, based on this work, EASA is publishing the first set of guidelines. So the drone manufacturers can then use these guidelines in order to develop their drones and have them certified. Okay, this is, by the way, if you are interested on the QR code for the reports. Otherwise, you find them easily in our webpage. And my last slide is, if you want to know more, please subscribe to our newsletter every week without too much spamming. You will be receiving some information about EUSpace, EUSPA, what we are doing, etc., etc. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm glad to take any questions.
Thank you very much. It's very dangerous to give people a QR code with these reports, because what do you think they're doing right now? They, of course, scan the QR code and they're reading it now instead of posting questions on Mentimeter, which I was very much expecting, ladies and gentlemen. I don't see any questions on Menti. If you have written them down and for some technical reasons they have not reached me, then please raise your hand and we'll get the questions the old school way, by getting a microphone and asking the question direct, or everything was super clear.
I think everyone is on the QR code. It was a mistake.
The reports, the reports, I'm telling you, they're super exciting. Seems so.
This one is easy. The other one is 200 pages, so it will take a while until they read them all.
Well, let's wait. Let's wait a while. They'll go through it with ChatGPT, finding the most important stuff that interests them. Ladies and gentlemen, do you have any questions, or can we leave it to that? Well, great. If I just may ask, we've discussed cyber threats, we've discussed everything that could. How do you see? Okay, there is one question.
Yes.
I will skip mine then, and let's take that one. How do you see the work share between EUSPA and ESA in the future?
I mean, the work with the work between EUSPA and ESA today is a fundamental part of the program. We work very close with ESA. We work, for example, if I give you the example on how we work with Galileo and Egnos, which is probably the most mature area since it is there since a while. We are working. I mean, we take responsibility for the exploitation, so the service provision, the security, the utilization. ESA is our partner when it comes to the development of the new system. So it is ESA working in partnership with us through an agreement that we have in place that is taking care of the development of the next generation of satellites, the next generation of ground segments. And then basically we take them and we operate, we provide services. And this is how it's working, and it's working today. Will this be the model for the future? I mean, on Galileo, clearly, will there be the opportunity to expand this model beyond? We will look at that. But I think it is a functioning model because it also takes the best side of both organizations, and I think that's the way we need to work in Europe.
So, can we scroll through the next question, because we just answered that we have on the screen. How are the market segments covered in the report chosen? Market cap, strategic importance, etc.
It's a very good question, and it's a very interesting question. And for those that have been going through these reports, they go across the years. The last one is from January 24. Every 2 years, more or less, we publish a report. And the segments have changed a little bit along the time. First, by the way, we only looked at navigation. Since the last edition, we started looking as well navigation and Earth observation. And when we moved from navigation only to navigation and Earth observation, certainly the number of addressed markets increased, because there are markets that are primarily navigation markets, markets that are primarily Earth observation markets, and markets that benefit from both integrated. I gave the example of agriculture, which is for me probably the best example of the synergies. Now, how do we choose them? It's through a mapping. There is no particular market cap. And you will find in here markets of very different dimensions. Transport is huge. It's a big portion of the space data that today is being used in transport. You have another one, medical, pharma. It's very small. But we put it there because it has the potential to grow. So the objective is not only to look at the markets that today are robust and mature and big, but also to look at those that across the years may actually increase and may grow.
So that addresses a bit of the next question. When will space projects be able to finance themselves and not just be reliant on public money?
But I think there are a number of things. I think it's an interesting question. There are things in space that are a public task, and there are things in space that are a private task. And not everything is public, not everything is private. Certainly, there are different things. I will give you an example. Today, we look at, when we look at Galileo, when we look at Copernicus, if you want from a higher political level, we look to these as basic infrastructures. I will give an example, and I'm sorry for those of us that are space engineers and think that what we do is very, very special, but let's look at space, at Galileo, the Galileo signals or the Copernicus images, a little bit like an energy system or a water system. You create a basic infrastructure. And this, to create a basic infrastructure, for example, to provide satellite images free of charge, to provide navigation signals to everyone, then create the opportunity to build the added value on top. And the added value is very much done by the private sector. One of the things I haven't mentioned, and probably I should have mentioned, is the fact that, for example, when it comes to the development of applications, we actually, from our side, we always co-finance that. We never finance in full the development of application, unless it is an application for us, for our public use. If it is an application for the market, from our point of view, it does not make sense to fully finance it. Why? Because the private actor also needs to be convinced of the advantage of investing in this particular technology. So what we do is we provide a kind of a subvention, we call it a grant, and the objective of the grant is simple: to de-risk. Because we know, sometimes the development of these applications has a certain level of risk, and it is too much for the private sector to take it alone. So we share the risk by co-financing, by providing a subvention, but we want to see investment of the private side as well, because we don't want to create a captive business. If you have a good business idea that you think it can work in the market, certainly you will be ready to invest. Maybe not the full cost of its development, and this is why we are here, but a part you should. So there is role for both private and public.
All right. The most recent question is, are there initiatives within EUSPA to look for synergies between EU space programs, both from the exploitation and also the security point of view, but also synergies between the services?
Very much. Synergies is really all these activities that I've mentioned, Galileo, Copernicus, they exist since a while. In particular, Galileo, EGNOS, Copernicus, they count, well, people will discuss when they were born, what was the founding event, let's say about 20 years that they exist. And for a while, actually until 2021, they were separate. They were separate, even pieces of law, pieces of legislation, separate budgets. And then in 2021, the union decided to bring them together. Normally, when you bring things together, it's to cut cost. It was not the case. The budget even grew. So it was not, the target of bringing things together was to create synergies, not to cut cost, in this case to increase the budget, but to create the synergies. And it is really fundamental. And where do the synergies come to place? In a lot of different domains, but in particular in the downstream. If you go to a tractor or to an agricultural machine, and you talk to the operator of that machine, that operator will not care whether the image comes from Copernicus and the signal comes from Galileo, and maybe the communication capability will come from IRIS². What that person will care is this machine able of performing a more efficient work than the machine I had before or not? And our role, I think, and our role, I don't mean EUSPA, I mean our role of the space community, the public sector, the private sector, is to be able of understanding what are the user needs, what are the needs of the sector, and then use space to help solve those needs. And this will only happen by synergies and by integrating solutions. And if you have, if you have an agro-business and you have 3 vendors coming in, one is trying to sell you an Earth observation thingy, the other one is trying to sell you an accurate navigation, and the other one is trying to sell you a communication through space, you're going to say, no, guys, go and sell your encyclopedia somewhere else. If there's someone coming and saying, no, look, I have an integrated business solution for you, then they will listen.
All right. This question is a bit vague for me. Do you want to take this?
I heard about ISABIC. is this the same at EUSPA? Big Business Innovation Center. So it's very important. We don't have business innovation centers in EUSPA. ESA has them, and there's a few ESA colleagues around that can explain you more in detail what the ESA BICs are and what the ESA BICs do. What we do is that many of our activities, both on Horizon and on Cassini, the companies that are involved on those activities can benefit both from the ESA business incubation centers, but also from the prizes, the grants, the networks, etc., that are deployed by the EUSpace program. So there are several companies that along different stages of their life, they are part of the ESA big family, and they are part of the Cassini, of the European Union Cassini family. And of course, here the idea is not to duplicate. So what an ESA big offers and what an ESA big does is different from what we do in the Union in Cassini.
Which organization or consortium helps EU-based companies to get international?
It is a very, I will take the international as beyond the EU.
Yeah.
Because in the EU, I mean, open market.
It's a single open market.
Exactly. Let's look at international beyond the EU. It's by the way, it's one of the objectives that we have, is to help and to support companies to get international. I mean, first and foremost, certainly an application. For example, if you're looking at the downstream, I will look in two levels. First, I will look at the downstream, then I will look at the upstream. Upstream is those building the satellites and the ground segments. So looking at the downstream, if you have a good application that works well in the European Union, how are you going to make sure that you sell it in the American market or in the Asian market or in any other market? First, by having access to the same services. And this is why it is very important that Galileo is global. And the way to process a Galileo signal is the same if you are in the US or if you are in Europe or if you are in Asia. It is also important that the Copernicus data is available throughout the world. And you can use images of Copernicus from another continent the same way you can use them from Europe. So this creates the basis. Then certainly, it's a matter of expanding the business and bringing the business internationally. When it comes to the upstream are those that are building the satellites, so the industry that is building our satellites, our Galileo satellites, is building the Copernicus satellites, etc. As long as we can protect the security interest of the Union, of course there is data and information that we don't want to go outside the European Union. Certainly there are plenty of cases where the Union has granted licenses for companies to use that particular know-how that was developed in EU programs to go and sell them outside. In particular, by the way, in the domain of EGNOS, there are a couple of concrete examples that I don't want to cite, not to benefit one or the other company, but there are examples.
Thank you very much. I think this wraps the discussion here because our schedule has some fresh energy coming up. Not that you didn't have any, you had plenty, but even younger space energy will be invited on stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.